Okay, so this week is kind of a catch-all week while you all draft your digital interface analysis and before we settle into the next steps of the mechanics of writing. Next week we'll be doing peer review. That will be set up in Brightspace, but we're actually going to conduct it in class, so bring your computers. If you come to class next week, the total outside stuff will be about 1.5 hours max, so come to class. A couple reasons why I wanted to lecture this week. This is kind of the part of the semester where we all really start to settle into a routine. If you're a freshman, you'll pick up on this. If you're older, then you've probably recognized this already. Routine can be both good and bad, right? Like if you've got good habits, routine can be a really powerful tool. However, with that in mind, it's also the point in the semester where if you're used to skipping stuff, you keep skipping it. You start to work only on certain homework at certain times, etc. I decided not to make videos this week to put a jog in the routine and change it up. You've all been doing great with coming to class and participating, and we're still going to do a thing at the end, so don't completely fall asleep. Alright, so with that in mind, we've done some identification exercises, notice the rhetorical terms and notice the rhetorical appeals. Last week we sat back and talked about different types of thesis statements: informative, argumentative, question or open-ended, and implied or narrative. Remember, you're going to be using an informative thesis statement for your digital interface analysis, so as you're writing and observing how your interface uses rhetoric, think about how you can sum it all up into one statement. That will be your thesis. And also, as you do this, don't forget to ask why it all matters. That's really the analysis part of the assignment and what will help you move beyond this sort of exercisedly ritualistic method. So this week we're looking super small picture at citations and citation methods, and also super big picture and talk about logic in general. Like I said before, this is kind of a catch-all week, so it might seem that some of it is a little unrelated. First, I highly recommend you go to the writing lab. We did an in-class demonstration, so if you weren't in class, you'll have to Google the writing lab and figure it out for yourself. Secondly, let's talk about APA formatting. APA style is put into place by the American Psychological Association, which is obviously the professional organization for psychologists. It's similar to ASME, American Society of Mechanical Engineers, or IEEE, the Institute of Electrical and Electronic Engineers. If you haven't already, you'll eventually come across a professional organization for your field. I recommend that you become a student member. When you graduate, become a professional member. It doesn't always, quote, get you anything, but going to conferences can help you meet people, network, maybe find a job, maybe find a scholarship. Also, just generally be aware of what's happening in your field. My understanding is that most of the social sciences use APA formatting. History usually uses the Chicago style, English and literature will use the MLA format, and some technical disciplines have their own. Purdue's OWL will tell you what your discipline uses, and you'll probably end up using something different in upper level courses. The English department recommends we teach APA since a bunch of disciplines use that. The Purdue OWL will have pretty much everything you need to know. Make sure you use a running header, title page, in-text citations, etc. It has been updated to APA 7, so you're good to go there. So see here on the left side, we've got in-text citations, the basics, authors, and your reference list. For your digital interface analysis, you'll probably only have electronic sources, or possibly audio-visual media. Here are a couple of sample papers. You'll want to use the student sample paper here. Okay. Alright, so moving on, we're going to talk about logic. Kind of like I want you to walk out of this class knowing that Aristotle was a guy who wrote about rhetoric. I also want you to walk out of this class knowing that logic is a discipline. As you can probably imagine, people can get really super into studying logic and applying logic. We're going to spend about 10 minutes on it, so yeah, there's only so much we can cover. So logic is one of those things that gets memed a lot. I made this meme here of SpongeBob, but I know I've seen it before. Also, facts and logic is a super memeable statement. A lot of times you'll hear someone say something may or may not be logical and it might actually be logical or not. It's one of those words that has an actual meaning and a colloquial meaning. So I'm going to read this quick section from the Encyclopedia Britannica about the philosophy of logic. So the philosophy of logic, the study, from a philosophical perspective of the nature and types of logic, including problems in the field and the relation of logic to mathematics and other disciplines. The term logic comes from the Greek word logos. The variety of senses that logos possesses may suggest the difficulties to be encountered in characterizing the nature and scope of logic. Among the partial translations of logos, there are sentence, discourse, reason, rule, ratio, account, rational principle, and definition. Not unlike the proliferation of meanings, the subject matter of logic has been said to be the laws of thought, the rules of right reasoning, the principles of valid argumentation, the use of certain words labeled logical constants, truths, true propositions based solely on the meanings of terms they contain, and so on. So, yeah, clear as mud, right? So the most straightforward form of logical statement you've probably heard before is if-then, or if-then statements, or if X, then Y. You may have seen this before in geometry. So, yes, logic is used both in the study of discourse and the study of math, which kind of suggests that more things are connected than we like to think. You know, when we go to college and we have everything divided into, like, this is the math department, this is the English department, and never the two shall meet. When really, you know, logic is kind of applies to both disciplines. I also want to emphasize that logic isn't just an academic way of studying. Real quickly, a lot of things that happen in our daily lives are controlled by logic. One way is with these supervisory control and data acquisition, or SCADA systems, which run water systems. I've worked on 2 of these in my life, one in DeMont, which is about an hour up the road, and one in the town of New Chicago, which is about 1,000 people, kind of in between Hobart, Gary, and Lake Station. So anyways, how this works is when people in the town use water, it comes from the tower. So if the water tower is at a certain level, then the water treatment plant pumps turn on and fill the tower. So if-then statement runs water. So why does all of this matter? Because when you write a paper, you can't just say, well, it's logical. You have to show why, and ideally you want to do it without engaging all these sort of logical fallacies, which we'll look at the end. Also, it matters because ultimately, right, logic is a way of knowing. If we say something is logical, we expect it to be true, because this is the way that we as a society have set up knowing things. It's the way we set up math, on which we built science and engineering and medicine. It's the way we set up Reddit, which is how we convince people ideas, etc. It's how we make our Facebook posts, but it's also how we get our water. So if you really want to dig deep into the philosophical weeds, ask yourself, is logic the only way of knowing things? Do we know things we can't prove with logic? If you want, you can look up ontology and epistemology, or ways of knowing. But, as we all know, some things we are told are obviously bullshit, and a lot of these are called logical fallacies. It's not to say all your arguments are going to be perfect, but you should try to use good reasoning, vast majority of the time. So one book you can read about logical fallacies is called The Fallacy Detective by Nathaniel Bluedorn and Hans Bluedorn. They use this little dorky dog for marketing purposes. I'm not sure if you'd call that ethos because he's supposed to look like Sherlock Holmes, or pathos because it makes you feel happy. We're also going to look at one of these sites to analyze or to kind of get a handle on logical fallacies. So all the sites kind of look like this. They're pretty they look like really non-high ethos, non-professional. But they're definitely worth looking at to kind of get a handle on some logical fallacies. All right, thanks for listening. Have a great day.